Well, welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Big Ten Huddle. I am your host, Zach Guggenheim, not JR. JR is taking a little bit of a sabbatical because he keeps producing content. He needs a break. He needs a vacation. So I'm here, and I've got my good friends from Sky U Pod, Max and Kurt. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Always looking forward to Taco for football. So good to see you, Zach. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you guys on. I was telling you guys pre-show, you guys, you love Minnesota football, and you guys do such a great job talking about Minnesota. I want to tell the viewers what to expect in this episode, but then I want to give you guys an opportunity to share with our listeners where they can find you. But what we're going to do, probably every Monday night, Tuesday night, sometime it'll be posted around Mondays, Tuesday mornings, maybe, is getting a different group of folks to talk about their program and how we should process this previous season. And so what I've asked Max and Kurt to do is to really kind of give us a post-mortem of Minnesota's 2024 season and how we in the Big Ten, as we look at the Big Ten as a whole, how should we view the season in context. And so that's kind of the goal of this episode. Before we launch in, Max and Kurt, tell us a little bit about your podcast, Sky U Pod.
Yeah, as you said, it's called Sky U Pod, play off of Sky U Ma. Max came up with the name, so I got to give him credit for the great name. That was a great pull. But yeah, we are now on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically anywhere you listen. And we are strictly Gopher football podcast. So in the off season, it's not as frequent, but as we ramp up closer to the season, we are weekly post game previews, pre-game previews, and then post game reviews of each game throughout the week. And yeah, and we do go live in the off season as well. We're just not as consistent just with the lack of news, but yeah.
Very cool. Anything to add there, Max?
We usually have a third, Spencer. He's busy tonight, but it's usually the three of us. We all grew up together. We all grew up as Gopher fans. We always talked and mostly probably complained about the Gophers, and it's kind of how the show came to be. We were like, there's really nothing else like it where fans can just talk and air their grievances about specifically Gopher football. So that's what we're here to do.
That's a good
people
point.
Like it.
The whole thought behind the show is to get a community of fans to just talk about it, because in Minnesota, there's really a few like insiders have a podcast, but there's not a lot of fan Gopher talk. So that was the idea behind it. So good point, Max. Way to bring that up.
Yeah. Well, and certainly in the beginning of the season, there were grievances to be had. And so maybe that's a good place to start, because I think, Kurt, you and I talked before the season, and, we looked at the win total. It was 4.5. What most books were putting out there was 4.5. And I think we were kind of dumbfounded because we're like, I think they're going to be a lot better than what people are thinking. But those first 4 games, it did not look good, right? The close loss to UNC. And then, we talked about the Floyd or Rosedale game, and we're like, we think Minnesota's got Iowa's number. And then that second half, it did not look good. Like, how concerned were you guys after those first 4 games?
Yeah, so I would start with saying, like, PJ's teams typically have a history of starting off slow. Even if you go back to his best year in 2019, a lot of those early games were nail biters against not the greatest of teams. So there is a history of that. So the UNC loss was not surprising to me, at least. I thought that would be a tight game just with, the new quarterback coming in and all that. But yeah, after that second half against Iowa, where they just ran Caleb Johnson, who's a terrific back, but that was the problem last year. The year prior to this past season was we could not stop the run on defense. And so it looked like that was going to be our same issue, was we could not stop the run. And so through 4 games, I thought, okay, we didn't really fix anything. Our offense looks a little different because Max Brosmer can throw the ball around a little bit. So yeah, I would say I was concerned for sure. In fact, I think that was one of our highest viewed videos. Was I was just ranting for like an hour after that Iowa game. Got like 1,000 people viewing it. But probably a lot of Iowa fans pretty happy. But Yeah, no. So the concern level after 4 was high for me.
Yeah, I was, definitely more concerned, or had maybe a lesser outlook on the season than I had prior to game 1. Um, but I feel like I'm probably more of an optimistic than anyone on the show sometimes. So I feel like I was mildly worried, but I always took away the positives of like, well, North Carolina, it's a couple missed field goals. We were right in it. Iowa, we at least saw the first half, what the potential of this team could look like. We kind of showed what our ceiling maybe was. Still, if not more disappointing to then fall apart in the second half and lose the Florida Rosedale that way. But I don't know. Coming off the first 4 games, it was like we kind of saw what we could be. Like Kurt said, we still saw some of the same issues from the previous season, but knowing what we know as Gopher fans, you can always kind of expect a slow start. So it was kind of tough, but I don't know. For me, I was moderately concerned, but it wasn't like, well, let's just get the season over with at that point.
So Kurt, you were kind of like, oh no, like the ship's sinking, and Max, you're like, hold on. It's not good, but it's not
the
bad.
alarm yet, but yeah, I was definitely more panicked than Max was at that point. Because then we had Michigan next, right? And so it's like we weren't expecting to win that game either. And turns out we probably could have because they were still playing Alex Orji at quarterback. We played a disastrous first half, and then we made a huge comeback late, and the refs didn't want to see it, so they stopped that. But yeah, there was some things there that kind of lingered throughout the season where it's like, okay, this team can be really good, and then there's also like, what the heck are we doing?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that, looking back, and it's hard to look back because of what we know now, like USC and Michigan is 8-5, but they, obviously they finished strong, but they weren't who we thought they were. USC, now we're like 7-6, but back after the Iowa loss, you're staring down the barrel at 2 top 25 teams. And so I can understand why there might be some worry, but that also, like, somewhere around there was a turning point. What would you say that was, or where would you say it was for Minnesota?
I actually believe PJ on this, and I don't always do that with all the stuff he says sometimes. But that second half against Michigan, the team was totally different. And I know we still ended up losing that football game, but they went from looking completely outmatched against, Michigan, who's got the higher overall recruits and all this, like that we see most of the years. And then that second half, they came out, made a push. And I mean, there was a stretch there in the fourth quarter where we kind of dominated them. And so from then on, I thought they kind of had their mojo back. And then it's like, okay, well, let's see. There's no promises that would carry over to USC. So I know I'm kind of stealing the big moment here. USC, I think, is when that turning point kind of capped off. But I do think PJ's right that it started in that second half against in the Michigan game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I wrote down the exact same note. It was the second half of Michigan. If we could have put the first half of Iowa and the second half of Michigan, if we could have put that Minnesota team together, I think we maybe could have won 10 games. I have no idea. But it just felt like, rarely do we get a complete Gopher team where it's all 3 phases. And that second half of Michigan, it was the offense, the defense, and to our surprise, special teams actually made some plays. So seeing that and just seeing how, we didn't quit and we didn't give up when we were kind of getting our butts kicked a little bit. We're already coming off the Iowa loss, the big letdown there. And we're in the big house, like definitely an opportunity for the team to kind of just take their foot off the gas and coast into the end of the game and, roll into the next week. But like Kurt said, they seem to get some confidence from somewhere, whether it was I don't know where it came from, or they really had no reason to feel confident, but they came out that second half and showed what they can do. And yeah, like Kurt said, after that, we rattled off 4 wins. USC, which at the time felt like a much bigger win, it still was for the program, but by the end of the season, obviously things played out the way they did. Even going to the UCLA, like that's not the toughest game on the schedule, but for where we were in the season and going to the Rose Bowl, it's still a big moment. And to win those close games like that too, it just felt like we were really kind of caught our stride after that, after the Michigan game.
Well, and after that USC game, the run defense really came together. It went from being pretty bad the first 4 weeks of the season to by the time UCLA came, they were a pretty good run defense from there on out. Not the best, but above average. And that was all they needed with how good the secondary was this past season. So yeah, the defense just like took full form, I felt like, once that USC win happened.
Yeah. We so on the huddle, JR and I often joke about, PJ and his antidote of confidence. But I think there is something to that. Not that they actually drank something, but at least I don't think they did. But
There's a little thing of Sprite.
is a little thing. Here's some Sprite. Be confident. But like I think to your point, it really seems like that second half against Michigan, it was like, hey, even though Michigan's not as good as they were the year before, you're still playing 4 first rounders on that defense, 3 or 4 first rounders. I mean, you've got Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. I don't think Will Johnson played in that game.
No, he did not.
But and then Colston Loveland on the other side. You've got a big name in Donovan Edwards. Like, it's not like they're scrubs.
Right.
And you guys not only went toe to toe with them, but probably should have won. And then you go into USC, who is a highly touted team, a blue blood in their own right, and you go and beat them. That should give you a lot of confidence. So, as you think about the season and PJ Fleck, I feel like PJ Fleck he's been hot and cold, right? And my question to you guys, what encouraged you about PJ Fleck and his progression as a head coach this year? And where are you guys still concerned with his development as a coach?
I guess from last year, the number one thing that stuck out to me was just his aggression offensively, especially in some key spots. I think a lot of it had to do with the trust he had in the offense, especially Max Brosmer at quarterback. Because we've seen in the past where if he doesn't trust a guy, we're running the ball almost every single play, which helps when you do have really good running backs. But, there were certain key situations in previous seasons where it just felt like we were just trying not to lose, or it was just overly conservative to a fault. But this last year, it felt like we really actually took it to some teams and actually tried to go out and, take control of games. And that's something that we harped on a lot on our show, and we never really expected to see. But seeing it, especially with a new quarterback, I know Brosmer came with a lot of experience, but he's still new to PJ. But he was able to prove himself and prove that he was a leader and prove that he could be trusted. And hopefully we can see the same thing out of, whoever takes over at quarterback this next season.
Yeah, that's what I was basically going to say too. Just his ability or his willingness finally to open up the offense and abandon the run game if it's not there. Took a little bit, but and there were still some spots where he went too conservative. I know we played overall a really good game against a really good Penn State game, but I think if you go back as a Gopher fan, there's 2 critical drives in that game where we got into Penn State territory by throwing it, and then we just ran it 3 straight times and settled for a field goal. So there's still situations like that where we'd like to see it, just let it loose. But he got much better at that. Prime example is going for it on 4th and goal to beat USC, which is not something I don't think he would have done even just a year ago. So I think just his willingness to adapt to what his offense is doing, he took a couple steps in the right direction this year for sure.
Yeah. Well, and Max Brosmer, to your guys' point, was so instrumental in that. And I was really thrilled to see that he got an invite to the combine. I really hope he does well and catches on with the team, because I think he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And I think was a big reason why they were in it against Penn State. Like, honestly, that Penn State game, it stands out to me because I think Franklin and Fleck probably struggle very similarly with their conservatism. Yeah. And I think I think the reason why Penn State came out with that win was because Franklin was just a bit more ambitious.
Yeah.
But I think, that being said, I think Fleck coming out of his shell a little bit, trusting Brosmer more, I think was huge. And I think obviously Brosmer being who he is was a huge part of that. So
Yeah, we were totally relying on Brosmer this year's offensive side goes. Like, we had 4 to 5 starters back on the offensive line. We were not able to control the line like we thought we were going to be able to do. But yeah, I mean, Brosmer kind of nickel and dime us down the field multiple times this year. So yeah, he was great. Wish we had him one more year, but I think he'll do. I think he'll catch on somewhere, at least as a backup.
Yeah, I think he's too good not to at least be a backup for sure. For sure. Okay, so here's a question I have for you guys, and this is coming off of a discussion that JR and I just had, which is we had our Big Ten coaching rankings. I'm not going to tell you yet where we placed PJ, but if you had to put PJ within the 18 coaches in the Big Ten, 1 to 18, in terms of his resume, in terms of where he is right now as a head coach, where would you place him in the pecking order?
Just roughly thinking about, there's a few coaches that just come to mind where I know he'd be behind, right? Ryan Day, national championship winning coach now. I know Ohio State might have not agreed with that for most of the year, but once he wins it, they're on board. So, he's behind guys like Day, Kirk Ferentz, right? I mean, just the longevity of his career and as many wins as he's had, you got to put him behind Ferentz at this point. I think just because of how Bielema's done it at Illinois and Wisconsin, I would give Bielema a slight edge too, and he's got the more wins head to head. So those are just guys that like immediately come to mind. Dan Lanning, and he's also got trying to take into account the different resources behind these coaches, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
So I would put still Lanning up there. Lincoln Riley struggled, so then it gets kind of tough as you go through. But I think PJ is safely a top 8 coach in the Big Ten, not in the top 4, but I think he's in that 8 range, in the top half of the conference. I really do. And I think one of the things we have to start looking at now is we keep losing assistants. PJ's gotten pretty good at growing out a coaching tree and being able to replace guys that move on either for different jobs or better jobs. Our D-line coach just left for the NFL. Our defensive coordinator left for Miami, which is a bummer, but he's shown ability to replace guys. And when it hasn't been a hit right away, he hasn't been afraid to make changes. We saw that with the Max, who's our offensive coordinator that lasted just like a year and a half. He lasted the COVID year, and then one season after that, he's gone. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh.
But anyway, the leash was short with that guy, so he's shown the ability to move on quickly when he thinks things aren't clicking. So I think that's something that maybe isn't recognized around like by casual fans as it is, Minnesota fans see it. So I feel comfortable with him. I don't have all the coaches in my head right now. Kurt Cignetti's probably got to be up there too after his 1 year wonder. But yeah, I think just roughly, I think PJ's in like the 7 to 8 range, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly where I got him too. I was just quick jotting down who I could think of off the top of my head, who's definitely ahead of him, who's definitely behind him. And yeah, I got him right at that 7 or 8, possibly 9 if someone really likes Matt Rule. But like you said, Kurt, with the amount of money that PJ has to hire staff, he has done a very good job of keeping most of his guys at least around him, especially within the the positional coaches too. It feels like they've done a lot of really good work. A lot of former players too are now starting to join his staff, which is pretty cool to see. But at the same time, it's not even PJ's fault, but it is hard when you don't have the capacity to keep your defensive coordinator who just had one of the better defensive seasons that we've seen. That's really neither here nor there. That's just an open complaint to the Board of Trustees. But
that's been a popular thing here as of late for the Minnesota fans, is getting mad at the actual university.
I'm going to put a bookmark on that because I want to ask you guys about that. But
I think the other thing too to highlight with PJ, especially within the new, the new era of college football, is it seems like he's done really well with the portal, both in the guys he's got and the guys that he hasn't lost yet. It feels like we've definitely pulled in a lot more than we've lost. We have lost some key players, but it seems like we're able to replenish more than we lose. So I guess for whatever that's worth too, it seems like he's done a pretty good job of navigating the new landscape of the transfer portal era.
Yeah. Can I tell you guys how good I feel about this right now? JR and I both had PJ Fleck 7th.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
That's why you guys are the best in the biz. That's what we always say.
Confirmation bias. All right. No, I appreciate how you guys are thinking about it too, because I think similarly, where we landed is, and I think you guys know, at least Kurt, you and I forget if Max, you and I have talked about it. I have not been a PJ Fleck fan. Like I have been. It's funny at times I've kind of put him and Mike Loxley on my do not like list, which if the listeners know how much I despise Mike Loxley. So this season was I think really helped me. PJ Fleck grew on me a lot this season, especially the way he responded and changed over the year. And I think between how he has navigated the portal, how he's navigated coaching changes, and also how he's motivated his guys. And I think been able to really motivate his team and evolve as a coach. Then you look at his resume, right? Like he's won every bowl game he's been in. Like that's impressive, especially at a place like Minnesota where it is harder to recruit.
Yeah.
And so I think what you guys are saying, I think we're very much in agreement that PJ is certainly a top half coach, and Minnesota needs to pay the money to keep the man right now, along with pay his assistants, which I'm sure we'll get into this probably later, as we talk more state of the union, state of the program later in the kind of the dog days of summer, but just speak a little bit. I know Corey Heatherman left, taking a lateral move. I believe it was a lateral move for more pay, right? That was what had happened.
Yeah, Miami. So, and that one, it's so the rough thing is that now we're on to our third new defensive coordinator in 3 years, right? Rossi had left previously for Michigan State, and now Heatherman to Miami. So the Heatherman one, I don't necessarily. It's upsetting, yet at the same time I don't blame him because we did give him a pay raise. He was going to make like 1.2 something million next year. Like it's not like he wasn't going to be getting paid anything. That was still going to put him, I think it would have been like 12th or 11th in the Big Ten, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember specifics, but it was going to boost him up there. And he had only been here 1 year. So I get not wanting to go in even more on that guy. To the guy, you just signed him to an extension like less than a month later, he took a job to Miami. And I mean, it's frustrating, but there's not a lot of schools nationwide that can compete with Miami. So even if we did have all of our ducks in a row, like administratively here, that one might have been tough to keep away anyway if they really wanted him, just because, they're a private institution. They got big donors. So it is what it is there. But the frustration part is Gopher fans to have it is just the constant turnover of these positions, like offensive coordinators moving on for not necessarily better job. Soraka left for Rutgers, Soraka left for Penn State. So he's left twice, and then losing Rossi and now Heatherman as ND coordinators. We would just like to get to the point where when we do find our version of, and I know everyone uses them, but like Iowa's got Phil Parker, right? At the defensive coordinator spot. When you have that guy that is kind of loyal to your team, to your coach to a point, you just want to be able to pay him enough to keep him there. So we would like to see the coaching assistant pool pay continue to go up. And it has gone up, but it's still just way behind where everyone else is. Indiana signed Signetti to that huge extension, but a lot of it was getting more pay to his assistants. That's what we need to see from the University of Minnesota, because PJ is getting paid. I think he's like 9. I think he's number 9. So he's not like wildly underpaid himself. And Mark Coyle, who I guess was the runner-up for the USC athletic director job, I think he's overrated, to be honest. Like, if part of his job, and I know it's not all on him, but is to get the Board of Regents to come up and get his coaches across all the sports the money they need for their staffs. And if he can't do that, I think Mark Coyle is in the top 5, I believe I saw, for athletic directors in the Big Ten. So if he can't get them more money, then how valuable to us is he? I know there could be worse options for sure. I'm not saying that he's terrible or by any means, but I just think change is needed. So we're trying to put more pressure on those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and we'll transition with after this, but I think what you're seeing across the landscape, Kurt Signetti's not just saying, pay me. He's saying, I need you to invest in the program. I need you to invest in facilities and my staff. You see, Bielema's doing it at Illinois. He's like, you got to invest in the facilities and you got to invest in my staff. And I think obviously the big schools are doing it too. Like you're seeing Oregon and Ohio State do it. You're seeing Penn State. Penn State's been on a tear with Knowles, with Stan Drayton. And I think that's the next evolution. And it might take PJ going to the athletic director, going to Coyle and saying, listen, if you want to keep me, you got to start paying our guys.
Yeah.
So, I'll get you out on a couple of quick questions here. How would you label the season? Like looking back at 8-5, won their bowl game, I believe a winning record in the Big Ten, big wins, right? But also some, some unfortunate losses, right? Is this a successful season, or is there a sense of like what could have been? Like, how would you put it into context for the average Big Ten fan of how the season should be viewed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was for me, it was a meets expectations, right? So if you consider that a success to meet expectations, or you consider that really nothing, somewhere in the middle. So I guess to me as a whole, the 8-win season, you beat one of your biggest rivals in Wisconsin. To me, that was a meet expectations. Now, you look at it, the season seemed like there was multiple mini seasons as you kind of go along. The lows were definitely very, very low. That we talked about the North Carolina and Iowa losses, and also dropping the game to Rutgers against our former quarterback, Ethan Kaliak-Manis. Like those just seemed like very crushing losses and very disappointing games. But then on the flip side, the highs were very high. Like we've talked about, like the USC, UCLA, beating Illinois for the first time in forever, and Bielema literally in forever. And then wrapping it up at Wisconsin, being able to take it to them in Madison was, that felt pretty good. And then we talked about Michigan and Penn State, two of our tougher opponents, playing them down to the wire in very close games and giving it our best effort. Like it all kind of averaged out, I guess, to somewhere in the middle. I would say it was mostly successful, but like you said, there was some meat left on the bone. But you could probably look at the flip side too. There were some games that we probably could have lost and it could have been worse. So to me, the season met our expectations, or at least my expectations.
Yeah, I would just say it was a passable season, kind of like Max said. I think there's two aspects to it. One, it was a very entertaining season. There was a lot of good games for the Gophers, a lot of close games. I mean, and when they went against those top teams, they were never really blown out. And then, like, even the Iowa game where the loss got ugly, like, we were winning at halftime. So there's no game we never felt out of. So that was just fun that you were in every game. And, yeah, like Max said, like, yeah, as Gopher fans, we feel like there was some meat left on the bone, right? Like, we were a few plays away from having a maybe type of Indiana type season where we got lucky and snuck up there somehow and got close to the playoff talk. But there's a lot of teams, stepping back from it, there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that feel that way, because outside of Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State and Penn State, like those next 6, 7, 8 teams down, they're all saying the same thing right now. They all felt like there was weeks they looked incredible and weeks they looked like what the heck was going on. So kind of a different year when you take a step back and look at it, just how many teams in the Big Ten were so up and down. So yeah, overall, I feel overall happy with how the year went. Just, there's a lot of optimism now with those last 2 wins of the year heading into next year and what we can build on.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's helpful to know that that's how you guys view it. And I don't think, and I really agree with you. I don't think it's just Minnesota that feels that way. I think there's a lot of programs in the Big Ten that feel that way. And I would make the argument, and tell me if you agree, that actually matters, that it met expectations and not that it exceeded expectations. Because I think a lot of people on the outside would expect Minnesota to be kind of elated with an 8-win season.
Oh yeah.
And Jared and I talked about this a lot. Minnesota, we felt like, was being slept on hard all year. And then of course they just took it to Wisconsin, and we're like, this is kind of what we expected all year. And they were up and down. And so I don't say that to be like, oh, they should have done better. But
No.
I think it's helpful to realize Minnesota's is in a better place than you think.
Absolutely. And, building off that, I think you're absolutely right to say it's important to make that distinction, because if you go another 3 to 4 years where like this is the type of season that you kind of peak at every now and then, like then we're going to look back at this season that just happened and be like, that was a huge missed opportunity. You had Max Brosmer, who went to the NFL Combine. You have 2 linemen that actually, I don't know if Quinn Carroll got invited to the Combine, but Ursu's supposed to be a top, go in the top 2 rounds. You have talent all over that. Daniel Jackson's going to the NFL Combine. So you had a lot of really good pieces. Cody Lindenberg's going to be drafted as well. So just, you had a lot of pieces on this team. So, and you got enough left over to still build up, and it's still exciting going forward. But yeah, if you look back and say like, well, at least they had a solid year in 2024, then it's a failure in my opinion, because you didn't do anything building off of it.
Yeah. Well, that leads, and Max, I'll start with you on this. Where does Minnesota go from here into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, from what we saw last year and, the pieces that we have coming back, and already a lot of the pieces we've got coming in through the portal, assuming they don't bounce in the spring window. But I think next year could look similar, if not a little bit better, based on the schedule. The big question marks is definitely quarterback. Probably going to be a younger quarterback starting. If it's going to be Drake Lindsay, it's kind of exciting to see him take over, because it'll probably be his team for the foreseeable future. So we'll see what that looks like. It, again, could be a slower start and might need some patience with him. New defensive coordinator. We hired from within our safeties coach, Danny Collins. But on the flip side, you've got a ton of guys coming in on the offensive side in the portal at wide receiver and offensive line. You've got most of your defense pretty much intact outside of cornerback. And then we've got some more pieces coming in on special teams too, a kicker and punter, which I know has been a huge problem for us in the past. So hopefully we can make some strides there to improve. There's really no one spot that is a glaring, concern, I guess, going in that's going to be detrimental to this team and what we've built. So, going into 2025, it seems like we've got some momentum that we can, keep on improving, and, who knows, we can maybe sneak into the playoff.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Kurt.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's an optimistic look, I think, right now for 2025, just with the guys we brought in. You look at the Malachi Coleman from Nebraska. You brought in the Loyola guy out of UCLA. And then you also got, I'm blanking on him, Tracy from, where was he? Out of the MAC, but Miami, Ohio?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So you brought in a lot of talent, and not that anyone's going to be better than like Daniel Jackson, Elijah Spencer are moving on, but you have guys that are probably more talented and have a higher ceiling just physically than those guys. So if it can all gel and get together, I know that's a big if, but the offense could be better potentially even without Max Brosmer, just, if they have the ability to create explosive plays, which is something that they did struggle with this year. But that could have been.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say, to your point about schedule, they don't start with UNC. They start with Buffalo. They start with Northwestern State. And then they go to ACC Power, California. Oy. And then they play.
They got Devin Brown, don't they? They picked up Devin Brown, I believe.
Did they? Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
He went to one of those schools. I don't remember.
I think he went to Cal because Mendoza went to Indiana.
Yeah.
So they're, the whole quarterback carousel, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, they start with Buffalo, Northwestern State, Cal, and then Rutgers. And so you're talking about maybe a really strong start, even if they do start slow. So Good stuff. I won't go too far into 2025 because we want to have you guys back to talk more about heading into the season. But again, tell everybody where we can find you guys.
Yeah, we're Sky U Pod on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify. I got the Twitter handle down there at Sky U Pod 1. We're on X mainly. And if you're upset about any of the posts, I take full blame for it because I do run the account. So don't get mad at Max and Spencer. So you can direct all hate at me. But it's fun. I throw out some posts that do get some people agitated, but it's all in good fun. So yeah, feel free to check us out for Go Football Talk.
Yeah. And for those of you guys know the drill, but if just in case you don't, make sure you like and subscribe here at the Big Ten Huddle. We post live Sunday night, Tuesday night. JR is doing basketball stuff Monday mornings, and I believe Thursday as well. And then, of course, for members, call-in show on Wednesday. So make sure you hit us up. Again, and we will be at you again tomorrow night live. Max, Kurt, thanks again for coming. We so appreciate you guate and appreciate what you do talking Minnesota ball.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. Take care, everybody.